Welcome back to the F5 podcast. Today we talk about building teams and changes that need to happen within the capitalist system. Please like and subscribe. Hope you enjoy.
So what are your thoughts on, you've obviously built a great team, and everybody here has built great teams too. Everybody has their own departments. What are your thoughts on what led to that? What were the obstacles that you had to overcome that led to you building great teams?
I think this is a topic that a lot of business owners and leaders want to talk about privately. So a lot of my private coaching, these are questions that get asked, like how do you build great teams? How do you keep teams together? And I think the answers aren't always rewarding, because it starts with you. Like, it's not, and that, like, usually people are, they want to hear, well, can I just throw money at this? Can I hire somebody to do this? And those could be answers, but it really starts with you. Like, how do you show up?
Right.
And doing the work personally to figure out how people are experiencing you. And then you got to get clear on your values. So a lot of young entrepreneurs that I coach that struggle to build teams, one of the reasons they struggle is because they're not clear on who they do well with. And so they get ideas of who the right candidate is, but it's based on somebody else's perspective. And to be sure, there are values and characteristics and skill sets that matter for the position regardless of your personality, but part of it is figuring out who's going to work with you, right? Like, how do you show up? What is your experience? And we talked about this so many times, but just as a reminder, in the framework, there are 3 leading indicators of lasting relationship, whether it be personal or professional, that show up here. And number 1 is you got to have a clear vision, right? Like your vision's got to be big enough that it isn't just about you, right? So the clear vision that doesn't just include you. And I'm surprised how many people don't. I'm like, well, if it's just about you, why the fuck how's that going to drive behavior? Why would anybody, generally, unless you just happen to find an angel from God that was sent to serve you, good luck with that one. That's not likely going to be the path. So it's got to be big enough to incorporate your team. And that's a framework that's really important. What is team? To me, anything worth doing is worth doing together and winning together.
Right.
And so that's number 1, clear vision. Number 2, shared values. We want the same things, right? We're moving towards the same things in life. And then number 3, you have to have an effective way to deal with conflict.
Right.
Because conflict is part of the human experience. And so that's an important one, and it gets missed. There's some people, the 2 camps are generally those who ignore conflict to the hurt of everyone. So things are just allowed to just kind of simmer and not be dealt with. And then there are people who are over aggressive about not letting conflict happen and not letting conversation happen, which is also, it's the same thing in opposite. So we got to work on us, like get clear about who we are, I think is where it starts. So I talk a lot about culture. I get asked to talk a lot about culture, and most of my conversations, at least the opening comments or, the conversation are going to be around the individual. Right. It starts with you.
What are the questions you'd be asking that individual?
What do you want? What do you value? What brings you joy? What do you get excited about?
Right.
What is your vision?
Right. Why do you think there's so much contention between like employees and employers right now, currently?
I love the capitalist system simply because I don't think we have a better opportunity. And I'm now actively researching alternative economic systems to kind of see like what are the realistic evolutions of our current process that could be effective. Right. And you need attention with humans. And I'm hoping in our lifetime, to be quite honest, which might be optimistic, I'm hoping we transition from living predominantly from fear to living predominantly in love. And that's the space that I'm holding. If we move to a love-orientated culture, and I know that sounds incredibly woo-woo, especially for people who have no idea even what the fuck touching love is, potentially some of these things change. But in a culture that is humans as a whole are predominantly learned through pain and are informed through fear, for better or for worse. So you need an economic sense, in that world, you need an economic structure that supports that tension.
Right.
You can't go too far to fear, but you can't go too far away from fear, because fear is what informs the individual. Now, we could argue whether that sucks or not, and certainly there's some idealism there. It's like, that's not a fun way to operate, but it is the way that we operate, right? So I'm looking at it, and I'm reading a book right now. A guy proposed that we go to a gift system, where essentially that everything is donation based, right? You provide a service, donation based. I know a lot of in your world, not quite bartering, but even like in the yoga world, it's not uncommon. What am I thinking of? Black Swan? Is it Black Swan?
Is that a movie?
That's Aubrey's company.
Or
Yeah, Aubrey's yoga studio is ranked, I think, the best in Austin. Gets great reviews every year. They're profitable. They do well, but everything is donation based. But I feel like I've been to a decent amount of yoga studios that kind of at least have a class or multiple classes that are like donation based. So I kind of like that idea, moving that direction. I just still have issues with that model too, because you get, and I'll stop so you guys can get in here, but like the big issue I have is in like hard goods. If you're giving away something that has a material cost, what's stopping somebody from taking it at a discount and turning around and selling it for profit? And basically
that's why I don't like commodities industries. They're just commodities industries. Things that like people can get anywhere essentially. You know, there's nothing unique or beneficial like going with you versus
many of them
else.
are important, but you're right. It's a race to the bottom in those industries more often than not in price.
Yeah,
if you can't differentiate yourself.
If there's one thing like with regards to business models that I would tend to avoid is anything where there's a ton of competition already. I would even if there's like a huge demand for that particular product or service, because the conversation you're going to have with clients or customers oftentimes will lead to things being said like, I'm talking to 3 other people. Please give me references, all that stuff. I want a product or service whereby I talk to somebody and immediately they're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's get this done. That's the type of product I want. That's going to help me build a business around, as opposed to, something where there's a lot of competition and I'm going to have to overcome random objections. Unless the one I think differentiating factor is brand. If there's a strong brand in a commodities industry, then that beats everything.
Well, that's a different discussion, and it's an important one when it comes to market strategy and finding your market niche.
Yes,
I would love to hear. And we're talking about we talk about creating cohesive teams. One of the pieces that comes into it is, I especially get this on TikTok for all of its ails and wonderment. There is an angst around the employer-employee relationship right now.
right.
And around capitalism as a whole. It's like within a certain crowd, I dare not say that is the predominant crowd, but I feel like within a certain crowd, it's a very contentious topic, and there's a lot of anger at it. And I as a whole, don't have a problem understanding the anger. I think in many ways, if you start looking in the 70s and 80s, we started really pivoting to profit on a level that was to the pain of people. And I think we've been forwarding our future, mortgaging our future in many ways and not dealing with that issue. And it's coming to a frothy head.
Yeah.
Where now you have a generation that's looking ahead to the last generation and going, I don't want that. I don't want to live that life.
Definitely a paradigm
I don't want to
shift.
give away 50 years of my life to a company that doesn't give a fuck about me, right? Like, I don't want to give away my life's like energy and essence to capitalism in the name of profit while I'm struggling to exist.
Yeah.
Right. And
100%.
And then so from that position, I'm like, so they're like, well, wait, if we're so wealthy as a culture, if we're so great as a culture, how the fuck can't we figure out universal health care? Why can't we figure out
I support universal health care.
Right. Why can't we figure out an education system that actually makes us better?
You know, be more efficient is like universal health care controlled by states as opposed to the federal government.
Federalists, that's probably a podcast for another time, because in the wake of Roe versus Wade, there's a lot of people that are very upset about that. But for the Federalists, that was a big win, because they didn't say it was illegal. They said, we're going to leave it up to the state to mandate what happens with this. Right. And that's if anyone who is a Federalist, that's like, yes, let's get back to that, because that was the whole idea. United 50 states, but the states get to govern as they see fit.
Yeah.
Which we're probably going to see more of this. And then that obviously begs the question, well, if we're doing it with Roe versus Wade, why the fuck didn't we do it with a host of other things that the federal government wants to be involved in, which they're getting their hands off a little bit at a time, like cannabis and psilocybin, and making it more, okay, here's the state. Now you can go too far with that. I mean, then we get totally divided, which creates its own set of problems. But nonetheless, I going back to this idea, I get where people are coming from when they're like, yo, like, for all the wealth we have in our country, why are so many people living paycheck to paycheck? And I get it. Like, I'm a staunch believer in personal responsibility. I'm a staunch believer in you are responsible how you show up every day. That does not mean that we don't have a social responsibility to help. And in the wealthiest country in the world, we can do better, and we need to do better. And so for me, I'm like, well, what are our alternatives? What are our economic systems? And so one that was proposed, going full circle, and I'd love to hear your guys' ideas on this, was this idea of everything's donation-based. Your services are donation-based. And I'm actually entertaining potentially doing a particular class that people apply for, like a coaching group where everything will be donation-based, and seeing how that works.
That's awesome.
I like this idea and principle, and especially with things where your cost is fixed, and generally that's like anything digital. It's like, well, it doesn't cost me more money relatively doesn't cost me more money to produce something digitally over and over again. Or if I'm doing a yoga class, it doesn't cost me more money if there's 10 people in the class versus 50 per se, like loosely, right? So it's like, okay, in those environments, potentially a donation-based process works. I'm concerned about its sustainability, and to me, there's a lot of pieces to it that seem idealistic, but I'm looking into it. So I'm curious, has anybody spent any time like, okay, well, if not capitalism, then what? Or how do we answer this?
I was going to come back to the whole donation part with the yoga classes, because for the entire pandemic, I was giving away services in which I felt the need for our company, our organization, and I still get credit for it even till now, even though I don't do it. They're asking about it a little bit more. I'm like, okay, if that's something that needs to be given, absolutely, that's in my heart to do. And it always comes back to just like, how much are you absolutely able to give? Because if you're not filling your own cup in a way, like, you can't give that away. So I like the idea, even if for you, Sebastian, for your services, like, say, for example, like, you do have a host of people that do follow you, but just don't have the means to just actually take your classes. That means, like, the world to me to have you even say that, because you are worth so much in a way where it's like, your value of services, like when we're putting down your, like, the monetary value of like your speaking engagements, I'm like, holy shit, yeah, that's a lot of money. But if you're just giving away to the people that potentially can only donate, say, for example, like $20, $50 for an hour of your time, whether that is, talking about whatever they need at that moment, awesome. Like 100% absolutely agree with that. And I think that even if it's just like one class, awesome. I feel like one class can make a difference, a whole world of difference, even for me too. I'm like, the way that I see it, because sometimes in my line of work, people are always like asking about like, oh, so how much are your websites and things like that. I'm like, honestly, like, it can range. I know that it can be a little bit pricey, but I'm happy to work with whatever you need. Like, we work with small businesses, so if like your budget is a little bit lower, by all means, like, I'm happy to help, So it is a service-based industry with what I do. Everything is online. But if it does come to products, that's a little bit of a different story, because like, you're paying for material, you're paying for shipping, you're paying for all of these things, which I understand why products can be a little bit more pricier if it is a unique commodity or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
That might be a little bit of a different story. But if you are able to give services, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think you just, as a proprietor, then you just have to have I guess, intuition or spidey sense if somebody's taking advantage of you, and then how do you want to approach that if that comes up? But I'm willing to participate. Like, it brings me great joy to give, and there's something given in. I went out with a dear friend that I was catching up with, and I habitually pay. I don't usually think about it. I just pay. And he was like, no, let me pay. And I was like, no. And we were arguing about it. And then I just heard a very small still voice say, let him pay. It's like I'm robbing him of a blessing if I won't let him do that. Right there. And a lot of people don't get that. There is a blessing in being the giver. Until, to your point, though, you have to be able to fill yourself up. If you're empty and you're always giving and you're never getting refilled, you'll become a martyr. You'll exhaust yourself to a point of, I've seen people go to that point where they give, and then they feel very alone and very isolated and they have nothing left to give. And it's like, oof, you need reciprocal relationships in your life where that is possible. And beautifully, I would love to see a culture where, it kind of is a barter system, right? It was like we exchange services, and going back to something that's more authentic. Like I'm all about profit, because without profit, you become like a charity, right? And businesses don't run that way. But you can't lose people in the name of profit. And that's, to your point, it's like, why are people pissed off? We're in the middle of a fucking pandemic, and I won't name the company or the CEO, but the dude lays off 2,000 people, and he bonuses himself $200 million. And I'm like, and we're confused why people are upset with fucking capitalism?
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
And then the American people end up paying for that, because we ended up bailing our asses out that we are all taking a hit for now with crazy inflation. Because I'm not saying that one dude would have changed it, but the sentiment of, hey, it's not profit, like, oh, we need to protect our company. Well, you don't need to protect your company when you took a $200 million bonus. I get it if it's like, hey, I took myself off payroll, I'm not taking bonuses, we got to protect the entity. That's one thing. But when you fucking bonus yourself $200 million, and like, I get upset thinking about this. Like, get the fuck out of here.
So in terms of like what a better system would be, I don't know that system. I think capitalism is the best system we have.
100%.
It's not perfect. There's a lot of bad actors in capitalism.
I don't think it's capitalism, though. I think it's the human orientation to it right now.
Yes,
where it's like we used to value people more.
It's who's using it. It's not necessarily the system itself. It's who's using it.
Like everything becomes about profit. It just starts to get gross.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Especially when you're talking about like essential goods and things of that nature. Things that where there's monopolies, and it becomes really just gross.
When medicine is about profit, not about helping people. When nutrition is about profit, not helping people.
In medicine, innovation in relation to profit is fantastic. But when it comes to hospitals, private equity firms buying out hospitals and then raising their prices on everything, and then the premiums change for all the patients, I think that's just evil, and that should be rooted out in society. I don't know how we're going to do that, but it's so private equity firms and hedge funds and things like that are so entrenched with politicians, and they're making huge donations and things like that. And the legal system too. I mean, in this country, it's very sad that the rich get the best service in every aspect of life. I mean, if you're a trust fund baby and you are convicted or you go to trial for a crime, it's more likely that you're going to get a lesser sentence than compared to somebody that's poor and can't afford a good attorney. Like it's a different scenario when you have 7 attorneys that your dad paid for coming to the courtroom versus somebody that's like, I need a public defender, and this public defender is saying, just take any deal you get. It sucks. So that's the bad part of what capitalism leads to, that byproduct.
But to be fair, I want to interrupt you real quick. Be fair, I don't actually think that's capitalism, because you had that in other forms of government too. Mm-hmm. All that is a power grab where the people who are powerful.
It's cronyism.
Right. They get preferential treatment and everything. It's just capitalism has gotten to a point where I think like you're saying, crony capitalism. We've gotten to a point where we've allowed this disparity to go unchecked, and it's becoming a problem. But I don't think it's capitalism as a system that is the issue. It's the hearts and minds of people. That's what needs to change, because you can have capitalism that's oriented towards people, like people matter as much as profit or more. We got to have a balance, and capitalism works.
Yeah,
right.
I think the best system is probably. Sorry to cut you off. I apologize, but I think the best system where there's a welfare state where there's checks and balances. So the government should step in when there's something going wrong, when there's a bad actor in capitalism, but it shouldn't be so involved that it starts hindering the growth of capitalists, if that makes sense.
I don't even know that regulation is the issue. I'm not against regulation per se.
We need regulation, though. The building codes,
But I guess what I'm getting to maybe is too idealistic, and I'd love to hear from you guys on this because it is idealistic.
Yes,
but
go ahead. Yeah.
But
Jump in.
I think we change this by changing the hearts and minds of the people. If we started loving each, like I know this sounds woo-woo, but if we started loving each other more, if we started seeing other humans as valuable, and we started prioritizing the human experience more than fucking profit, I think this changes on its own. I think the issue is our scorecard right now in most places is profit. Everything is profit. And we've lost the human element in that process. And it's like, I don't know that you deregulate. I don't think regulation is how you get rid of that. And in many ways, it may flare up even more because you're putting pressure more on profit, and their instinct is to want to fight for profit more. Where it's like, well, and I'm not saying that deregulation is necessarily the issue or the option, but how do we get back to a point where we realize, hey, like there are humans involved here and they matter. They're not just a fucking cog in your system.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So we've gone on a few different trails here now, so I'll try to backtrack on some of them. But more recently, what you were saying in regards to even like someone being represented in court, that to me is almost like the same concept of like a universal health care, and that like, hey, if everybody's provided health care, that's probably going to be a pretty basic health care if we're providing it for everybody, right? And then those that do have more money are going to want to be able to afford and have better health care. And that's not unfair or unjust. Like, hey, if you're wanting something for everybody, like here is that base package for you. And for the judicial system, it's like, hey, if you can't afford a lawyer, one is going to be provided for you, right? So at what point, like there's always going to be something for the people to complain about, I think, regardless of the model. So I think coming about it with love is one thing, but also like teaching people how to think and like just having people like critically like look at what it is that's happening and then see both sides instead of take things so personally. The other thing that I was going to bring up in regards to the medical system, Mark Cuban is making a stand for this right now. There's like the pharmaceutical industry, at least for certain drugs and the patents that come around certain drugs, is disgusting. Like how much it gears towards profit over the care of people. And at least from my perspective, I obviously am not super experienced in a lot of different diseases, but cancer is a big one where it's so highly about profit and not about curing a freaking life-threatening disease with medications, or at least not curing, but regulating symptoms around a life-threatening
treating the disease
is
far more profitable than preventing it.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I was going to mention, going back to the gift model, it's interesting. Like I have a friend and all of my information is just gathered from Facebook. So I don't know all of the details of what went into this, but he teaches yoga and he was working at a studio. And I think something happened with like the politics there that he didn't like. So he made an announcement on Facebook like, hey, I'm going to be offering my classes for free. I don't believe in profit. I don't believe in like taking money for like bringing people to yoga because it's something that's been so valuable to my life. And he actually got attacked for offering free services from other yoga teachers because they're like, well, all of our students are now just going to go to you, and that takes away from our profit, right? So then his answer back to that was like, okay, well, we won't do free classes, but we'll do a donation-based model. So that's just interesting to me, like how even somebody offering their services for free is going to get chastised because of what it takes away from other yoga teachers in that example. But I have seen more I guess service-based services, people-based services that are going into that gift model that's donation-based. But with hard goods, like I don't think that there's a way that would work. I think that there needs to be a massive price correction on all of the goods, especially in America right now that we get to try to come back to an even playing field there, because right now it's just ridiculous. And all kinds of different industries. But like that makes me go back to also, like, again, business, like at some level it has to be about profit if the people are wanting to have certain expectations of how they're getting paid or how they're getting treated as well. Because what are you going to go to a gift-based
that's the
employer model?
Right,
Like, hey, I'll work for you, but only pay me what you think I'm worth, right? No, people are going to go fucking nuts over that.
Well, that's a point of contention that I would make with if there's one thing I could do with regards to people that want to be successful. If you don't want to be successful, then totally fine. But there's clear things that successful people do versus people that are unsuccessful. And one thing I've seen people that are unsuccessful do consistently versus people that are successful is they're very transactional and less relational. So they're like, when they come into a job, they're like, hey, I have like, this is the market rate. They're always thinking about like, I can tell like right away, this is not going to get you very far. They're always thinking of like, okay, how much am I getting paid right now? How much can other people pay me? They're looking mainly at pay as opposed to
you can get hired as a mercenary in that world. It's just very lonely,
right.
Because it's a lonely world.
If there's one thing that like I literally desperately want to teach people is that don't be so transactional. Try to provide value, and it's not a loss. Like even if like let's say you take a lesser salary, right up front. In the process, you could learn so much that would make it not a loss at all, and you could take that to your next employer. But the thing is, like, people are so focused on, I need to get this for what I'm doing, or I need to do this, or whatever. And I'm like, dude.
Well, especially like, early when they don't have a lot they're not adding a ton of value yet. They're being developed or grown. They don't come in with a lot of talent. It's like, shut the fuck up and learn. That drives me nuts. If you have a well-developed skill set that you know the value of.
Yeah.
I get it changes. That changes the discussion a little bit, but especially early in your career,
right?
It's like you showing up isn't just a blessing. You're not blessing us with our presence that they go, I'm here, like pay me. It's like, I mean, the human in you, yes, but from a value, like what value do you bring? If I have to develop and grow you, like the value is in me teaching you, and that gets missed. But I'll counter that, to interrupt your flow here real quick, but I'll counter that. What would you say to the employee who goes, fuck you, companies are just as transactional. They'll drop people with a dime, like without thinking about it, because they need to hit their quarterly earnings, or it's all about, again, profit. Like, what would you say to that guy?
I would say I get that. I get 100% what that guy is saying, because he's probably seen it maybe with his friends, peers, like they just dropped him or whatever the case may be. But if you come in with the mindset of learning as opposed to I want to make profits and you want to make an impact, I think that's going to do you much better than making, $3,000 or more, whatever the case may be. If you come in with the mindset, whatever I get from this, I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to take it to my next, destination. I think that's far more valuable than getting another $500 per paycheck.
And I would offer this. You attract what you are. Right. So if you come in willing to give and you're somebody who's dependable and you're willing to do what it takes, if your employer doesn't see that, you'll find one who does. And you'll find that match.
You have plenty of options. Yeah.
Right. But don't, it's like right now, it's like, it seems like either side is going, well, if they change, I'll change. And the answer to that is no, you won't, to either side.
Yeah.
Right. It's not how it works.
Be the change you want to see.
Yeah. Be the change you want to see. The only way this changes is if you change. But I want to talk more about this. I got to jump into a leaders meeting, but this is a topic that's close to my heart. And my goal is to make Fenix a model where we get uber transparent publicly about our pay, how everybody's paid. And we just show, I want to create a model that other companies can follow. I don't want to follow in Dan Price's. He got super quiet and I don't know why, but he got really loud and obnoxious for a few years and now he's dead quiet and I don't know what happened. But he started getting really antagonistic towards companies. I want to show how we could change the model. How do we take the capitalist model in our company and we make it more fair, where there's going to be a pay disparity based on the value and skill set you bring, but that we're super transparent about this is how we do it. You know what I mean?
Really
create
quick,
a model that other people can follow.
Really quick around that. It really comes down to education. It's like, okay, you have to know your options. Like if you want to, win big when the company wins big, then start early. Don't start like when the company's fully fleshed out, fully established. Start early, ask for shares, do whatever. Like,
Well, you're right about
you know,
that. I mean, the guys who get in early and make those bets are going to do better